On today's episode, we have Ross McGarva. We follow his journey from California to Oregon to California and then to Texas. We follow it along with different classes of beef cattle, meat goats, and hair sheep. Along the way, we talk about processing and what you should look for in a processor, and then dive into electric fencing and some tips for that. I think you'll enjoy. Let's get started. So, Ross, we'll get started with the Fast Five. Our first question, what's your name?
Ross McGarva.
And Ross, where are you located?
Now we're in Central Texas, Event, Texas, so about 60 miles west of Waco.
Oh, okay, west of Waco.
Yes.
And what's your farm's name?
We just call it McGarva Ranch.
What year did you start grazing animals?
Oh, man. I grew up on a large 1,000 cow, mother cow operation in the extreme northeastern corner of California. Family's been on that ranch since 1918, I think it was, that they bought that ranch.
Oh, yeah.
But they've been in that area. The first of 8 brothers came from Scotland, and they came to Likely, California in 1908, I think it was, and then herded sheep and did whatever needed to be done, and sent money back to Scotland to bring the rest of the brothers over. So family's been there in that little valley, South Fork Valley, a long time.
Oh, yeah. And what livestock species have you grazed?
Cattle, mostly. We've had large herd of goats, meat goats, and here in Texas we're grazing goat and sheep, Orphan, Katahdin, Coss, most large. So that's quite a most of the broad. Actually, we've got some chickens even. So.
Oh, yes.
Fast chickens.
Well, those chickens may be making the most money with the egg price.
Yeah, we probably could change our prices, but we just held steady because we're not selling direct to retail on this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're just wholesaling it to those people some folks that want to interact more closely with the customers. So.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, the podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of grass-based livestock producers and exploring regenerative practices that improve the land, animals, and our lives. I'm your host, Cal Hardage, and each week we'll dive into the journeys, challenges, and successes of producers like you, learning from their experiences and inspiring each other to grow and graze better. Whether you're a seasoned grazer or just getting started, this is the place for you. Calling all livestock producers, are you looking to improve your soil health and maximize forage use? Register for the Noble Grazing Essentials in Huntsville, Texas from March 25th through 27th. Noble Research Institute's 3-day course provides classroom and field training led by knowledgeable facilitators with real ranching experience. Learn to assess carrying capacity, implement adaptive grazing strategies, and develop effective pasture recovery techniques. You'll gain proven methods to maximize productivity while building soil health and resilience, and leave with a customized grazing plan and tools to immediately transform your ranch. Space is limited. Visit noble.org today to learn more and enroll. Invest in your operations future with Noble Grazing Essentials. For 10 seconds about the farm and the podcast today, I'm in Oklahoma where the wind's been blowing like crazy and we've been having some fires. Nothing around me, but I know Wyatt and Sam from episode 151, they had to move their sheep and the land they're grazing was burned. I've seen some photos, some aerial photos, drones and airplanes that just crazy destruction in some areas. There's lots of other areas I haven't seen much out of yet, but just keep them in your thoughts and prayers. And with that, let's get back to talking to Ross. Ross, when you think back to California and growing up, did you plan for this life or did you have other plans?
No, it just seemed like the path that was expected to walk down, off to college, Cal Poly and San Luis Obispo, and then went through the Ranch Magic program at TCU in 82, 83. but this might be kind of getting ahead of what's part of the story as well. So yeah, I came back from the range management program, on fire, ready to go change the world. And it really wasn't a place for me there. My dad and my brother were partners, and yeah, welcome to work alongside, but the, I don't know, I had an epiphany when I turned 45, and I realized that was the same age Dad was when I came back to college. I was like, no, I wouldn't have wanted to step aside either. So
Yes.
went and did a lot of other things, which gave a really well balanced, got a lot of experiences.
I came home from college, worked here with Dad on the dairy. We sold out dairy. I continue to live here and work on the farm with him while I worked off the farm, with the goal, at least in my head, that I would buy the farm and take over at some point. It was my late 40s I finally had the epiphany, even though Dad had said he's not ready to sell it. Well, he'll let us figure that out after he passes away. I always thought I'd have that opportunity. I finally had the epiphany in my late 40s that, you know what, maybe I need to go do something so that I have a greater opportunity, because right now I just help Dad.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's when I got in gear and got land to lease and started running my own animals.
Yes.
I often think back to that and think, why was I so slow to figure that out?
Yeah.
On my part, Dad was very blunt with what he said, and I knew he said it, but I always had it in the back of my head, hey, this is going to go a little bit different. And finally, when I figured that out, I mean, I still help Dad, but now I've got my other stuff going on. So sometimes it takes us a while.
It takes a long time. Yeah. Yeah. We wound up, my grandfather helped us purchase small by a lot of standards. We had a half section of ground in Southern Oregon, Lakeview, Oregon, high desert.
Oh, yes.
300, so it had 320 acres, and 215 of it had water on it. About half of that was not reliable water. It was first flow out of a creek with older water rights downstream, all snow back related. But that's really where it kind of started into practicing intensive grazing and falling in love with electric fence, because we weren't living on the property initially. There was a year of transition, and so it historically just been stalkers, somebody else
Oh, yeah.
on there. And so my cousin husband lived right nearby, and so they took care of irrigating and moving the cattle that were there on gain. And the irrigated ground the property was split in two pieces, kind of north and south. And anyway, we had the cattle when it came time to ship the cattle were on the north side of the creek that ran through it, and a bridge to cross them, because they wouldn't cross the creek. It took 5 cowboys about 2 hours to get those cattle out of the field and then walk them a half mile down the road to the scale.
Oh,
They were there on game. And I said, never again. I'm not doing this. So the next year they followed me to the scale, and, no stress, because I'd been moving them twice a day the whole season, and that wasn't possible for us the first year. But anyway, I spent that summer building single strand hot wire fences ahead of these cattle.
Oh, yes.
And it served us well for 20 plus years, that little bit in poly pipe on top of the ground out to the water trough. Learned quite a few lessons through all of that. But yeah.
So you came to it from, you had these stalkers on gain,
Yeah.
so they've got to gain weight, and that stress of that day, obviously they didn't gain any weight that day and they lost too much.
Right.
So that spurred you into looking at intensive rotation and doing more of that practice. Was there some other factors in there?
Not really. The driving factor, if you at 30 cents gain, a turd on the downside of the scale versus the upright side of the scale is worth about $3, so.
Oh, yeah.
So, you spend a lot of that. There's a lot of money lost on the wrong side of the scale. And that was really, for me, kind of a driving factor. And my own place, I could do whatever I wanted with it. That was really key thing in it. Was I didn't have to ask anybody
right.
I could do this. And And we saw tremendous improvements in soil health. Actually grew soil. It was all flood irrigated, laser planed in, or probably not laser planed, but land planed in. And over the course of 20 years, the water, we increased the soil height in the pastures that we couldn't get water across the fields anymore.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And I mean, it's a real thing, they changed the quality and the depth of the soil just by walking down, organic matter and increasing the soils. And so it was, well, yeah, let's go back to your question because I'll get to rambling on here. You lose.
No, that's
Yeah.
great. As you think about those years rotating animals and building that soil, what practices contributed the most to it?
Really just high stock density, although not as high at that time as I did later on in another, we'll get to that as well, but high stock density and also twice a day moves. And so I would set up some moves ahead, and I had a town job, a couple
Oh,
hundred
yes.
acres in a 100-day growing season, a 75 to 100-day growing season. You're not going to make a living off of it. You hope to pay for it. And
Right.
I had a town job, which was kind of interesting because my job to start with, the first couple of years we had it was I worked in the assessor's office as an appraiser. And one of my jobs was to establish farm land values for the special assessment. And so I know every state's different, but there's typically a farm assessment, I think, in most states. But we would do a survey, and it was based on least values, so
Oh, yes.
$50 an acre a month for prime irrigated ground a month per acre, and was typical. And then you ask the questions, are you doing any of the care? Are you doing any mineral? How much time you spend doing that? Is it on the gain? Is it per hit per month? And we had 30 or so leases that we would survey in order to establish these values for different soil classes, as they're not RCS classes. They were just in-house appraisal classes. So I would throw my deal in there because essentially it was the leased ground. I was the operator, and so I'd get paid myself time and, worked everything through it. And every year that I did that, I had to throw mine out because if that class one was at $50 per acre, I was getting 100, and it would just,
Oh,
and I was
yes.
the only one that was getting that. So it just confirmed it. It's like, oh man, if I could do this at scale,
Oh,
then,
yes. Yeah.
but I never really pursued, mostly because, well, the security of the town job, kept the bills paid and everything.
Right.
And so it was always kind of hard to imagine just jumping out into the deep end or stepping out of the boat onto the water, not knowing if you're going to sink or swim. So kept a town job for a long time. But
There's a lot to be said for that security,
yes,
that safety net there for you.
yeah,
During your time in Southern Oregon, did you focus only on stalkers through that time?
yes. Although we did start our goat enterprise while we were in that as well. So we had some rabbit brush and some invasive juniper plants coming in on our dry ground that we wanted to try to, control a bit too. So,
What challenges did the goats bring
oh,
in
man,
to you when you brought them to the stalker program?
our netting fence wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't respect electric fence. And yeah, it was kind of, my wife laughs at this a lot because it was kind of we were doing some out of town consulting, and I thought, like, okay, I've got them locked in, I've got them gone around this, and it's 100 acres of dry ground. They've got water, they've got feed in here. There should be good. The neighbors would call and say, hey, your goats are over here again. And rush back up and gather the goats. And it seemed like, through the years, as we would put a known number of goats in this space, and to winter them there later on, and they'd get out occasionally. But I'll tell you what, every year that we came off of that same parcel of ground, I was short about 50 head of goats. No idea where they went.
Oh,
just
yes.
gone, whether it was coyotes or they leaked through a hole. But I don't know where they went. Nobody ever said, "Hey, your goats are over here." So I don't.
Oh, yeah.
I think ultimately it was if they leaked out and were away from the herd and the dogs, then it was predation that ultimately got them. It
Oh,
always
yeah.
came up short. But yeah, the goats. So we had a mixed up bunch of goats, and this is a little nugget that we learned. If you buy goats, buy all your goats from one place. Don't put 20 from here and 50 from there, because you'll have a herd of 20 and a herd of 50 and a herd of whatever else you've got. So at one point, we had like 5 or 6 little herds floating around out here.
Oh, yeah.
And there were no cohesion. And so some of them would, they were the ones that were always breaching and leaving the country on us. So I got tired of it, and I just loaded them all up one day and took them to sale. And when I got the check back, told Kelly, I think we're going to build some fence. The value of goats, and then I started paying a lot more attention to the market.
Oh, yeah.
Then took the lessons that we'd learned like that, and we went and found a guy that was doing a huge grazing operation with 9,000 head of goats from San Diego clear to the Canadian border.
And how's he count those ever?
On the truck. Yeah, on the truck. He had going everywhere. We had, I think, 25 Peruvians working for him.
Oh, yes.
And he truly bought us dog food by the truckload.
Oh, yes.
Border collies. But anyway, we went and we bought 400 head of like 60-pound just females, and a few rams and a couple of Pyrenees dogs with them. And but this time they stayed together because they've been raised together. So it helped a lot. So anyway, yes, we did goats.
I know with my goats, I've had as many as about 50 head,
Mm-hmm.
but I never had a problem with the cohesion of the herd.
Yeah.
They've just stayed together. Of course, I built it slowly, and I raised a lot of them. Well, I sold those out. I can't even remember. I think in 19 I sold all my goats.
Mm-hmm.
But I bought some a couple years ago just to have half dozen.
Yeah.
So I've just got a handful. Well, I went and bought another half dozen. I say half dozen, I think it's 8 and 8. I bought another 8 last fall. And they do not hang out together.
No.
And I thought this winter I'm going to solve that. I pinned them up some. I've got them actually here at the house in a smaller pasture.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than where I usually graze them, because I'm trying to build that bond, and they still don't hang out together.
So I've got an interesting story. So I drove to Cheyenne, Wyoming from Oregon with our trailer. I built a double deck in it, and I went and we had a friend that had a milking parlor, was making cheese and stuff with dog goats.
Yes.
And she knew this lady or knew of her anyway. And she wanted a whole bunch of these milking goats from her, but she said she's got these 3 burros that are guard burros and some other meat goats. Do you want, if I put this deal together, I'll pay for everything, and you can have the burros and those half a dozen Saunans or whatever. I can't remember what breed they were. So I said, okay. So I drove to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and then long trip back. But about a couple months later, I was looking at this disjointed bunch of goats out there in the front pasture, and there was a truck went by on the county road, which is just at the edge of the pasture. And I don't know if it backfired or anyway, a sudden noise, whether he revved up and took off, But anyway, I watched those donkeys sift through that bunch of goats, get the 6 that they knew, and brought them to the barn.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody else out there, the coyotes or whatever that loud noise was. And that was, for me, was just truly a lesson as well, so would kind of help that problem we got rid of those goats that they knew.
Oh,
and then they had to we kept the donkeys, and they were there. The donkeys didn't work well for us. A couple of things, like they would hang up on a barbed wire fence when the sheep went through or the goats went through.
Yes.
Yeah. Had a llama at one point. That same thing. I lost a bunch of stock to coyote pressure, and the llama's down there looking over the fence, can't get there to help. But the burros, did not recognize newborns as part of the herd. And we kept finding these flat, just about the thickness of a padded envelope,
Oh,
and
yeah.
just mashed flat. And then one day we saw them doing it. The first time that little baby would make a noise or move when it was getting born, they'd go over there just smashing it. So we had to keep the burros out of the mix when we were kidding. So I don't know, they were. So
My donkey is not that bad, but I don't want him around when they're lambing
yeah,
because he'll grab a lamb and toss it and throw it
yeah,
and shake it.
vicious.
It's like, yeah.
We watched it
And
one time with a coyote.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're effective, but you just gotta, yeah,
But you bring up a couple of excellent points, or excellent point about llamas and donkeys. We struggle with the same issue. I've got one of each, and they get hung up on a fence if sheep go through the fence for whatever reason.
yeah,
Now I do have dogs that stay with the sheep, but yeah. So I do find the donkey and llama in a different pasture, not a different pasture, the pasture where the sheep were supposed to be when I find the sheep somewhere else.
yes, yeah, yeah. So we had some sad lessons here in Central Texas that we lost a couple of dogs to hog snares. Because,
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, that's a sad day when that happened. So
Yeah.
that wasn't an issue back home, in Oregon, because there weren't any feral hogs,
Oh,
but
yeah.
here it's been pretty tough. So
So you were running meat goats and stockers in Oregon.
yes.
How'd you end up in Texas?
So family lease transition thing that kind of fell apart and couldn't make a living on what was left of it. And we had sold we had a meat processing business. We'd sold that at the same time. And we were offered a job in Central Texas. So we came down here.
Well, Ross, I want to jump back. You said you had a meat processing plant.
Yes. Yeah.
How did you get started in the meat processing?
Well, I worked for the county first as an appraiser and then as a building official because of construction experience that I'd had, when I left the home ranch. And that was a pretty high stress job there.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
high stress. I was the only guy in a county of 8,800 square miles, like Oregon. Yeah. And, and a lot of BLM enforcers, but there are little private pieces out there too, So anyway, people came to Lake County because they didn't want to follow the rules. Well, I was the guy that was the regulator in that. And so anyway, my blood pressure was high.
Oh,
I'm going to,
yes.
and it ceased to bring any joy. So I got to looking and I'm going to get back. I've got a ranch management degree. I've got years of experience. And so I started to apply for some jobs and was looking really hard at one in Florida. And my wife and my daughter was in 7th grade, I think. At that time, they said, go ahead, but we're staying here. I was like, well, I can't keep doing this job. And so the local, established in 1940, Lakeview Lockers mobile slaughter custom meat processing plant was for sale. And so we bought that there, and we had experience in the meat trade in first year in 84, 85, when my wife and I got married. We were actually my college roommate and I were starting a natural labeled beef business in California. We were putting frozen product in health food stores in the Bay Area. And we were just a little ways ahead of the curve. It was, and distances and, a lot of factors. But anyway, we put together a cooperative effort of ranchers in the meat processing plant in Modoc County, California. And then, we spent some miles on the road up and down.
Oh,
And after
so.
about 3 years, we'd sold 50 beef and finally decided the vegetarians just don't eat enough meat to support this business. And so it wasn't a far stretch for us to buy this deal, this meat processing plant. It was a needed business in town. The young couple that had bought it didn't like it. They wanted out of it. And And so we took an old established business. I mean, it stood alone, and but it was dingy. It was dark. It stunk. It smelled bad. The offal was stored on site. The renderer came once a week in the busy season and once every 2 to 3 weeks in the off season. And so all the offal was stored in a cooler outside, lots of flies.
Oh, yes.
The hides were salted in a van beside the building, just more flies, more steak. And it was in a residential area. And so we didn't want to be in that environment. So we made some changes. We remodeled the front space and put in a high-end deli full service meat counter, cutting, breaking carcasses, USDA carcasses that we'd buy, local beef that we get processed, as we could, box beef from Country Natural Beef, and beers and wines and cheeses from all over the world. It was fun. I mean, our culinary bar got range really high.
Oh, yes.
And we had a lot of fun doing it, but we just pretty much worked ourselves to death. But one of the things that happened as a side deal to this was that the renderer started to get a lot of pressure from the state Department of Environmental Quality, and they just shut down. There were 2 local renderers of kind of the same family. I wouldn't say local. One was in Central Oregon and Bend. One was in Medford, Oregon. And they were the one out of Bend area was the one in the service us. And they just shut down. So I called the DEQ and I said, we got a problem. What do we do? And they suggested we compost. And through a long process, we began composting this. There was a lumber mill there that had huge sawdust and chip piles that were also a DEQ issue. And so we hauled some of that out onto our place, set aside a couple acres to put the compost on, and we started composting butcher waste, and which made a great soil amendment, but mostly it was a waste disposal for us. And it was kind of unique. It was kind of a pilot project for the state. California still doesn't recognize that it's viable. Well, still at that 15 years ago, they didn't recognize that was a viable way to get rid of butcher waste. Cornell University's done a tremendous amount of study on butcher waste compost. And it was a win all the way around. But one of the main things that we did was it got all that stink away from the locker plant.
Oh, yeah.
And so the upside of that was the quality of the beef, because beef picks up odors so fast in a cooler. And if you got one tainted beef or a locker or a cooler full of offal, I mean, your beef's going to taste funky. And so we got rid of all that and everything, again, the bar got raised way high. And so that was a bonus for us to do that. But
I didn't realize beef would take on smells like that, or their taste would be affected by that.
It really is. So a lot of time, and I grew up having this experience, like all the beef that we ate just had the funny flavor. It didn't taste like store-bought beef. It just, after having run one of these, what it is just a bad bones, bones get soured, and that transfers into that beef, and it's in every piece of meat. It's in the hamburger. And so when I have stuff processed now, I go inspect the plant and I'll walk through the cooler before I'll let them put a hand on it. If it smells bad, I don't want my meat tasting like that, because it's going to smell and taste just like that cooler smells. So.
Okay, let's dive into that just a little bit more, because I know a lot of our listeners, they go and they have meat processed, they're selling direct to consumer in some fashion. You mentioned going there and inspecting it or getting a tour. Tell us what you're looking for and how you approach it. Are most operators open to it?
If they're USDA, they kind of don't want somebody just walking through, but you can tell pretty quickly from their outside. even
Oh,
if
yeah.
there's bad odors. So if they're if they have a good rendering system or a good waste disposal system, that offal isn't on site, it's away, even if it's a couple hundred yards, it's going to be fine,
Oh,
but,
okay.
but if
Yeah.
you just use your nose, use your eyes, if it's neat and clean, if their cut tables are clean, USDA has their standards. Local processors, of course, everybody knows about selling wholes, halves, and quarters and bundles, but they, yeah, just use your senses. If it doesn't feel good, there's a reason.
Oh,
Doesn't
yeah.
smell good, and it can happen. We hung wild game. We hung it in a separate cooler, but that, like my meat cutter said, if we're cutting game, I quit today. He said he wouldn't do it because most of the game is poorly handled.
Oh, yeah.
And so if that's commingled, my understanding for regulations that we were under with the Oregon State being just a custom processor, not USDA, we could hang wild game in the same cooler. They just couldn't be on the same rail. So there couldn't be contact, where they had to
Right.
be socked or covered. And so there couldn't be contact even with our custom processing. But what what we found in hanging or allowing people to hang their own product, we didn't have anything to do with the slaughter or the skinning or gutting, any of that stuff. We just didn't do it. We wouldn't do it. But they could bring it in, hang it in our cooler to chill it until they were done hunting and take it home, or take it to another processor. But we had funky odors in there. A lot of time it was bone souring the hips on elk, and
Oh,
you know
yes.
you get you get an antelope. The antelope smells like a billy goat, and stuff. Yeah. So anyway, that's just a separate deal, and I think the same things apply to your game processor. If it smells bad, your meat's going to come back smelling bad. Yeah, we learned a lot, and I've got actually a few things I'll just throw out there for free.
Right.
So for somebody that's doing direct to consumer, and I've seen this and done this with, in our experience. So we did, you know, it was all custom, but some of the stuff we would do was we would facilitate locker beat. So like I'd get animals off of ranchers that I knew, and then I could resell them as hamburger bundles, 20 pounds, and you got the whole animal sold before you kill it. Then
Oh,
you're
yes.
legal. So a bundle is not defined. You can have a 10-pound bundle if you want, but you just have to have that whole carcass sold or oversold before you harvest the animal. And that's legal it's arguable anyway if your inspector says it, but it's very arguable because what is a bundle? And then
Right.
the we've got some friends that here in Texas that do farm to plate, whether it's a CSA, where they're going to farmers markets and standing there. They're going to the sale yard and they're buying cattle and maybe feeding them a little bit at home, raising them up. But I have seen this many times, often, and eaten a lot of them myself, because a rancher will always sell his best to pay his bills, and his family eats the one that broke a leg. I'm
Right.
speaking to the choir. and
Yes.
and that beef is almost always tough. So I heard a guy from, I think he was from Chile, anyway, South America, or Argentina, that does a lot of grass fed beef, and in their studies, if an animal does not gain, if a beef does not gain at least 3/4 of a pound every single day of its life. So calf with scours,
Oh,
sore
yes.
foot, bad eye, they go off feed. And I have killed animals that I know or was able to find the history on, that were on the game, 2-year-old heifers, absolutely beautiful carcasses, so tough you couldn't eat them. And, they look, I mean, they degraded high choice on the ribeye, just gorgeous, gorgeous.
Oh, yes.
But then you find out, oh yeah, that calf, when that was a calf, it had foot rot, and we doctored it. So you can't judge the quality of the beef by what you see today. And so if you're selling direct to consumer, like dang sure you know what you're buying, or the ones that, you know. And so we handle country natural beef in our meat case. And in the 5 years that we had their beef in there, we had no complaints. And it
Oh,
was
yeah.
beautiful. But here's the thing. Any animal, and this was an agreement of it. So any animal that had ever had to be doctored did not go through their program. They went to the auction yard or sold.
Oh, yeah.
So they had a self-sorting of the quality of beef for that early to end in its life, all the way up to slaughter. If they never got sick, I mean, the ear tags are notched and they're out of the program. And I believe that's why that beef was always high quality. So they make great hamburger, grind them, but don't try to do steaks out of them. And the other thing I would do is anytime we had a locker beef that I bought from somebody, like one time I bought a bunch of Wilpede steers. I mean, they were so cheap, and exactly half of them, I went ahead and kept them a year and a half, you know, and got them up to a decent harvest weight. And exactly half of them were so tough you couldn't eat it. And I think those were the ones that had been starved down to hold over to another season. And the other ones,
Oh, yes.
these were all Forietis, short-horn roping steers. But the other half were beautiful beef and fun. So, it's an example how you can do it. But what we would do when we sold these carcasses is I would always go in there and cut, even if it's just a thin steak, off of that split on the quarter, and we had a stove in the deal, and I'd fry it up and we'd try it. If it tasted good, if it was tender, then it went ahead and got packaged in steaks and roasts and were standard cut. But if it was tough, it all went to grinder. So that's how we maintained the quality on what we sold to our customers.
Yes.
That's my advice.
That's wonderful advice. I mean, you brought a couple of things to point I didn't realize. I'm thinking, could you go to where we take it? If I go ask them, hey, I want to try a steak off there before we make a decision how this is processed. Are they open to that? Or I know you can't speak for them, but
I
generally,
would certainly ask, and I would find somebody that is open to it. And sometimes, I mean, there may be some hardships with timing. So it worked well for us because my cooler was short, and my slaughter rig was short, so I quartered everything. So it was already
yes.
cut there. If they're
Oh, yeah.
hanging in full halves, you might go, you're going to hang 2 weeks or 3 weeks or however long you're going to hang it. But if you're hanging it, let's say 2 weeks, go in there at, 12 days and say, hey, can we cut this? It's not there. You're not going to lose much from a dry out on that where you break the quarter, and then just take your own knife and cut a little bit of it out of it. It's your meat.
Oh, yeah.
It's your meat. You're going to lose a little bit when they do the trim. You might lose one steak out of the thing, but you just get some.
Yeah.
And
How
go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how long do you think they need aged?
There's After 10 days, some studies show that the tenderness doesn't change. So 10 days is long enough, 10 days to 2 weeks. And if you hang it longer than that, the flavor can change. And again, if your cooler's good, you're on the positive slope. If the cooler smells bad, you're just getting worse. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in a dry cooler, I believe it's 5 days. I think it's 5 days. It's been a little while since I did this. You can actually have a mitigation plan on the USDA plant that can be your E. coli control. I believe it's 5 days in the dry cooler. All that bacteria that's on an animal will die.
Oh, okay.
If the cooler's wet and damp, which if it's not draining right or your evaporators aren't working in the cooler right, I think it can actually get worse on you. But that's 5 days in a dry cooler. So I would hang everything at least 5 days, because even a USDA inspected plant has bacteria in there and molds and stuff that they have that's there. So that's, yeah.
Excellent information on all that, Ross. And That's a turn I didn't anticipate when we started
Right.
talking. I was like, whoa, wait.
Yeah. This isn't just grazing grass, but no,
It's good
yeah.
information.
Well, everybody, I mean, I run into it over and over again. And anybody that's raising cattle looks at it and you see the commissions at the sale yard. You see, you're getting beat up here. You feel like you're getting cheated there. I'm just going to sell it direct. And you have friends who are going, hey, can I buy some beef from you? And for us in Pacific Northwest, there were very few USDA plants that you could get, to
Oh,
farmers
yes.
market sector. So we had Reno, Nevada, at the college there. They ran a kill plant, and the next closest, or they were both about the same distance. There was one in Prineville, which is east of Bend by 40 miles or something. So that was a hardship for us to get, local beef, which we love to do because it's so much fun to break the carcass to fill your meat case with. I mean, you got so much options to do. It's way better than boxed beef.
Oh, yes.
But here in Texas, I'm sitting within 50 miles that I know of 3 USDA plants,
Oh, yes.
and then there's a mobile, there's a processor, there's a lot of them here. So we were the only one. We would travel 100 miles one way to kill beef. I put in 300-mile days and killed 5 beef. Makes a long day, and we didn't do it every day. We didn't week,
yes.
we'd sort local stuff so you get home for dinner. But
Just a recent episode, we were talking about that. There's a USDA processor a little over an hour from me, but they just recently there's a new one that's about 30 minutes from me. So it's going to be really nice. We haven't tried it yet, but I'm looking forward to it because I know the lady who's running it, and I think they're going to do a great job.
That's great. A lot of people want the vision, but it's a lot of hard work and finding skilled help. I mean, our meat cutter had been a meat cutter his whole life, and he was 62 years old, I think, when we bought the plant, or 65 maybe even, and he'd already retired from a grocery store career.
Oh, yeah.
But he didn't want to be home. He was bored, so he'd come in there and he'd cut 2 beef a day for us, which was the capacity our cooler would hold, and we tried to get him help for 10 years that we operated the thing, and never, I mean, everybody, we had many, I should say it that way, not everybody. I had 2 or 3 young men that came alongside that time that actually panned out and could have become butchers. One of them did. The other one went on to other things, but they, I'm a hunter. I kill my own stuff. But I tell you, finding somebody that's skilled with a knife that can learn. I mean, like I said, we had so many, and it was hard. And part of it is, we held our standards really high. This is somebody's meat and supper we're working on. And it's going to be clean when it goes in our cooler, and it's going to be clean when it goes out the freezer door, And I could usually tell if they couldn't sharpen a knife or couldn't learn to sharpen a knife, then they weren't going to cut it, and it's like it proved out every time. If the guy showed up and could sharpen a knife and keep it sharp throughout the day, then you're going to work out.
Oh, yeah.
So
Ross, it's been really interesting to talk about the processing side of it, but I'd like to jump forward and talk about what you're doing in Texas now.
Okay. Well, Texas has been really a scaling back for us. We bought a piece of bare ground here. It's prime farm ground on a floodplain and very deep soils, which is very rare in central Texas here.
Oh, yes.
And but we've been in the drought. We sent our flocks to a solar farm for a year. They came back in August, and we've only had like 4 inches of rain, 5 inches of rain since then. And so the cool season plantings.
How much rain do you all usually get?
Well, what's true anymore?
Yeah.
So we had the brochures for Central Texas say we get 32 inches.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yes.
don't know when that happened last. I've seen it rain 7 inches overnight, which
Oh,
which
yes.
can be devastating. We had last winter, starting the 1st of September, or the first, that first week, last week of August, first week of September, we usually get a storm front comes through. And you can get 4, 5, 6, 7 inches or something like that. And I don't remember how much it was, but it was significant. The timing was perfect. Got all the fall plantings up. And then we had timely rains after that, and the temperatures didn't get too high on us again. And then we had, oh gosh, it was November. I was helping a friend unload a bunch of cattle that night, and oh my gosh, it rained. One guy said he got 19 inches of rain that night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they call them tanks here in Texas, filled every water hole in the country. And then we got timely rains through the winter. And in April, more rain some more, everything's saturated. And then I think it was the night of the 4th of May, we had another big front came through, and it dumped over 7 inches that night. We'd had like 3 inches 2 days before that, and man, we flooded.
Oh, imagine so.
Yeah, we're on a creek here called Cowhouse Creek, which is just a huge watershed, and right here where it comes by our place, it narrows down, and it's a pretty close estimate. The water in that creek was 25 foot deep, and it came across our oak crop down here. I have 5 foot pipe posts that I pushed in the ground that I hadn't capped yet, and they were full of water that had come over the top of those. So I mean, it happened, and then we were actually in the first 10 days of May, we were flooded in here, so we couldn't go either direction out of here for 5 days. And it took that long for the water to go down, and then it's get down, and we get another shower come through.
Oh, yes.
So
did you have some place for your sheep to go, or were they over on the solar?
Fortunately, they were on the solar farm, and we didn't lose. Had they been here, they'd have been washed away.
Oh, yeah.
I've met people that lost. Well, one guy, his uncle over here on the Lampasas River, lost 145 stalkers gone. And I've heard stories since, and everybody's still talking about it. We're just not even yet a year into it. And finding cattle, 30, 40 miles away that somehow didn't drown, got washed down.
Oh, yeah.
Down towards Temple. But it was devastating. I mean, it was actually pretty frightening to see that much water. So how much rain do we get? It depends on when.
Right. Yeah. Now, when you went to Texas, you had experience with stalkers and meat goats, but you didn't go that path.
No, I didn't. A couple of reasons here are our resource base. We bought bare ground. So I found, old fences, the perimeter fences, and then interior fences with little old cedar stick posts still left. And my best guess that those fences were built about 1865, based on the wire type that I can find. This is some pretty unique wire in.
Right.
And so, and as we started clearing cedars and whatnot, we were finding old horse-drawn, tongues still on it. I think it's cotton equipment. I don't know. I've never seen anything.
Oh, yes.
But so this was cotton farmed. It was, who knows what was grown here, but this has been absentee owned and leased ground for many, many years. And so there was no stock water. The fences were all gone, no power in here. And so we actually got ahead of the curve and went to a Dorper sale, and I found myself my hand in there, and we brought home about 85 head of livestock ewe lambs. And it's like, okay, now how do we keep them here? I could haul enough water to feed them, and they're keeping them in stock. So, and we worked for a direct to consumer cooperative effort called Captain Lamb for a year too. So I got, to sorting and working slaughter lambs, and that I just really fell in love with these little sheep. They're not all docile, but at my age and physical abilities, they're not gonna mash me up against a fence. I've been there. And so the cattle, went behind us for that. And what we had done, there's another chapter of our life that we did, going back to talking about, the generational transition and so at 55 years old or thereabouts, I finally got my opportunity. My dad decided to retire and sold his cows and gave some to the kids. And it was, and I guess if you've got a really bright young child that's headed into college, there is such a need for people to facilitate generational transition and get it done well. That's a huge hole. And what we're seeing nationwide, is these ranches are getting bought up by investors who see the appreciation value in the land, drive it beyond production value, and then they hire somebody, but they don't trust them enough. Anyway, there's a whole realm of that. And in the meantime, like you and I, that our parents are at that retirement age, but yet we've got our own thing at this point. So what do you do? So anyway, we had kind of worn out, the concrete floors and the butchering in the middle of winter. And so I was tired of processing meat. And so my brother called me one day. He had actually gone back to the ranch and stayed. But he called me, he says, I can't do this anymore. He said, my back hurts, my shoulders are shot, feeding hay bales. And he said, I'm going to leave. And so I talked to my dad and I said, I need, can I lease the place, essentially. And he said, man, I didn't know what I was going to do with it when Shane left. And so, but again, this communication and mixed goals or visions were never talked about. My family didn't talk about important things. You talked about the weather, you talked about, that cow out there and the beef prices, all these things, but nobody really talked about what's going to happen here. So I got the opportunity to lease 2,500 acres irrigated ground on a 16,000 acre BLM permit, and 3-year lease on part of it, which belonged to my uncle, and 5-year renewable lease on the other part that had most facilities and whatnot. But I'd runched off her cattle, and I told Dad I don't want to do cows with calves. I don't. Like, the most anxiety producing thing in my life is moving a bunch of pairs down a county road, driving all these young calves out, 20 miles to the BLM permit or Forest Service permit, and sitting out there at the end of the day trying to mother up cows or calves, and all the cows want to do is go drink and eat, and the calves are looking back through the fence. So, and I had the experience that I'd had on our place in Oregon of high density stock grazing. So we spent a couple months putting in 2-wire high tensile fence along all the ditch banks because it's all flood irrigated ground, and poly pipe on the water lines, and we did extremely high stock density grazing. We had 2,500 to 3,000 head of yearlings, everything from organic dairy heifers, had every label that exists represented, to just commercial industrial cattle that were going to go to a feedlot. And we ran mobs as big as 1,100, moving them twice a day between behind electric fence. We saw phenomenal things happen in the soil, the ecosystem. Learned a lot about where I had gone with 1.5-inch pipe. I should have had 2-inch pipe, things like that, but we got to see, if that could go on to a couple more hours, talking about the things we saw. But cattle will learn to handle if you show up, and every time you show up, it's good. You're moving them to fresh feed. They'll follow you through hell. Yes. And we had videos we took of this, the big mob, 1,000, 1,100 head of them moving down a ditch bank, and the lead is, the whole string might be a quarter mile long. The lead's out there just following the electric fence trail that you've set up going down the ditch banks to get to the next one. And you might be making a 1 mile, 2 mile move. And the one guy that's with them is pulling the water trough in the middle of the herd, and the water trough and mineral trough are all tied together. And he's got, he's truly in the middle of the string of deals, and they're all going and everybody gets there fine, So we did over and over again. And the high stock density, we would try to leave 4 to 6 inches of residual feed behind us. And it was all red clover, white clover, fescue, Italian ryegrass, a variety of other lesser, types of plants, but it was all irrigated meadows. We saw through the process of this, because, we wouldn't come back until things were fully recovered, which, and had adequate feed to make it worth the time to come back. But we saw a tremendous increase in the clover density and the clover size, like the red clover leaves the size of palm of your hand. And then we saw when you went standing out in the field behind that mob of cattle at the proper stock density, there were no turds. They had already been incorporated down to the soil level.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you went later in the year, and of course the protein carbohydrate concentration or contents change in the feed, and your gains drop off, your turds get harder and stuff. But the other thing that we would do is we would spread the animals out. We didn't have the high stock density later on in the grazing season, and so but you start to see those turds start to stay on top of the ground. And so that was just one of the things. And the other thing that we saw, which kind of surprised all of us, that valley, a lot of water. It was an old swamp that was drained, and mosquitoes were absolutely horrible. And so I had several people say, you won't be able to do this. Those cattle run all the time. You won't be able to raise these cattle in this. But we'd already committed to do this, and it's like, we're doing this. And so what we saw happen, because these were hay meadows that had traditionally, been cattle moved off of them in April, May, middle of May at the latest, and gone out to the mountains. And then you let that grow up. You irrigate it a couple of times, cut a hay crop off of it, bring the cattle back, and throw all the hay back out on the ground again. And all through the winter, and so we interrupted that mosquito cycle by doing this. And for the first 2 years that we were there, mosquito population almost disappeared in the valley. We disrupted their egg cycle. The other thing that we saw that happened, and we didn't notice it right away, but the barn swallow population increased, and we would have like 2,000 barn swallows sitting there at camp waiting for us to jump in the scooters to go out to move cattle, and they'd up and go with us. And as you move those cattle forward into the tall grass, and the mosquitoes in the tall grass would come up, it was so much fun to sit there and watch those birds. They just, by the thousands, So that it was pretty cool to see all of that. So anyway, I had rambled on.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. So how many years did you graze that large number out there?
No, we had a 3-year lease that was renewed for 1 year on the larger portion of the irrigated ground. And then it was put on the market for sale, and they didn't renew our lease. And the other one, well, it became economically, it's like, I can't keep a full crew on here. We can't run enough cattle. We still ran the higher stock density, but we weren't contiguous anymore. And so it became more challenging, and so cut the crew back. My son-in-law managed it for us, and he and the irrigator, I'd go help him, when we made big moves or whenever help was needed, shipping and whatnot. But so we did it for another, I guess, total of 5 years. We ran some pretty high stock density, long enough to know that it works. And I've wanted to replicate it and do it again, but And I've tried to do it here with the sheep somewhat, but I just don't have, well, this was bare ground, and we quit fertilizing and spraying on it. So it's been a regenerative cycle. And
Right.
then of course you get the droughts. Last year looked really good, and we thought, man, we've crossed that hump. And then we just, after May, I'll bet we haven't had 6 inches of rain since May last year. I haven't added it up. It's probably more than that, but it's not, it's not been timely,
Not enough.
not enough. We had 4-inch rain like Labor Day, and then it got back up over 100 degrees again. So it sprouted all the oats and stuff that were there and then just burn them up and kill.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's like, oh my gosh, it's, yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit there that you're trying to do, or you tried to do a little bit of high density with your sheep, but the land's not quite there and everything.
Yes.
What practices have you brought to the sheep that's really helping you there?
I've trained them to stay behind one wire, electric.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And that took a little bit of training. When I worked for the lamb company that kept the lamb, we were doing some grazing and whatnot and setting up nets and all that. And there was a company called Razor Grazer that out of Canada that I became a dealer for, and they were just coming out with their Shepherd model, which was a 4-wire model. And so I got one of those and I used it. It's helped a lot. And it's not unique in its concept in that it's just a handy tool because it's all contained in one deal. But
Oh
But
yeah.
setting up and taking down 4 wires in one fence is quite a thing. So I just really quickly went to 2 and found that they stayed fine, but I could run 2 over here and 2 wires over here and have a couple pastures set up. And the nice thing about that unit is it's a push button to roll it back in again. So it's pretty handy. But then I thought, well, let's try one. And you get the occasional one, and then that by mistake gets out. But if she becomes a habit, she goes away before she teaches everybody else.
Oh yes.
But the guy that had him on the solar farm, he kept all these sheep contained with one wire. And I was actually surprised he was able to do it because the wire there was a lot of traffic going in and out. And so he kept the wire was only about 6 inches off the ground. It's like, how in the world
Oh
did you get
yes.
that? But yeah, they stayed where he put them. So
Yeah. Of course, sheep want to go under rather than over.
yeah, they don't like to go over. That's true. So
Now, one thing on that, you went with Dorpers.
yes.
Why did you go with Dorpers versus any of the other hair breeds?
Well, I saw him with the butcher deal that we were involved in, and they hang a beautiful carcass. They've got a
Oh yeah,
tremendous
that carcass quality.
flavor, and I was also impressed with a true Dorper. They're like a they're 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 like a pig in that they weigh way more than they look like they're going to.
Oh
You know,
yes.
and they grow really fast, and so I've got some Katahdin mix out here, some white, leggier ones. And I don't know, they just don't seem to produce the weight that the Dorpers do. So
We were talking the other day, and I told you I'd got a Dorper ram I
yeah,
used on my Katahdin ewes. But it's not a Dorper ram that I've seen some photos of. I'd like to get one of those really muscular rams that I've seen pictures of, but I haven't seen them around here.
yes,
Surely someone around here's got
they're
some, but I haven't found them yet.
they're out there. There's a gal over near San Saba here that's got some tremendous, powerful rams like that
Oh
bought
yes.
some of her yeah, she was. I went to pick up her lamb crop or some of them that she was selling into this cooperative deal. And they were 5 months old and they weighed over 100 pounds. And
Oh wow.
they were beautiful. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go buy my rams.
Oh
So,
yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I need some growth on my lambs like that.
Yeah. Yeah. They push the scales down pretty fast. So. And the other thing that I like about these hair sheep, and I don't know if it's true with all of them, but they will actually do a lot more browsing than wool sheep for sure.
Oh,
You
yes.
know, they're a good cross between the goat and the wool sheep, in that they'll eat a lot of stuff like a goat.
But with a single wire, they're a lot easier to keep in than a goat.
Yes, impossible on a goat. Yeah. No, we looked at this, knowing what we'll be faced with, and thought goats aren't an option for us. So, in 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 the desert, and where we were in Oregon, Northern California, if they got away, you'd find, or even if it took an airplane, you're going to find.
Oh,
Here in Texas, you wouldn't find it. There's so much brush and cedar thickets and stuff, and you'll probably never see it again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, Ross, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I know we've just skimmed the top of it, but it's time today for our famous 4 questions. At Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. Same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. Our first question, what's your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
I've got a friend that just wrote one that I have listened to a couple times, named Tony Malmberg. He's with Saber Institute, and it's called Green Grass in the Spring. Love that. It's available on Audible too. He reads it himself, and it's his story, walking, it's his life story. Another book that I've read a couple times and found it very encouraging is called The Gardeners of Eden, subtitled Restoring Our Relationship to Nature by Dan Daggett.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's one that's just, he just cites some examples of good grazing practices and the environmental changes that occur. And it's just really encouraging. So I've read it a couple times. Typically I only read a book once, or I might not even finish it, but those I've done a couple of times. I've tried to get through Alan Savory's book, but I'll read a paragraph and then I start thinking, and it's like, I got to read that again. And I never have got more than the first or second chapter through it.
I'm guilty as charged as well. I've started reading it a few times. I've not got through it. And I used to be hard on myself about starting to read a book. I had to finish it. And with a little ADD, it's kind of hard at times. But I've let go of that. If a book's not serving its purpose for me,
Yeah.
and that doesn't mean the book's not good.
Right.
It means I'm not getting what I need out of it. I have no problem putting it up and not reading it.
Yeah.
And that's taken me a long time to get to that spot. But now if it's not serving my purpose, I just move on.
Another one that I read that I got quite a lot out of was Breaking the Hay Habit. I think Jim Gershwin, which actually challenges your thinking. Like, why am I doing this? Why have we always done this? Why can't we change? So.
Yeah. Excellent suggestions there. And I didn't realize the greener pastures what was it?
The first one?
The first one. I didn't realize that was on Audible.
No.
Or there was audio book. I'll have to look that up.
Maybe. No, the first one was Green Grass in the Spring by Tony Malmberg.
Green Grass in the Spring, yeah. Because I am pretty sure that's another book I have that I haven't read yet. I'm going to start making a list of the books I've read, because I've got like every book I haven't read. But
yeah. Yeah.
I love having an audio book because I can listen to it in my ear when I'm out doing stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
Ross, our second question, what's your favorite tool for the farm?
Electric fence, in a general sense. we couldn't have done our high density stock grazing without Gallagher's tumble wheels. I think
Oh,
I
yes.
would have to say that is my single most favorite tool. It just made it possible for both front fences and for back fences because we were grazing lanes. And a lot of people never seen them, but my gosh, they are, and they don't work well if you have obstacles in the field. But if you
Right.
have like irrigated runs or, and fairly parallel fences to work in, then they're the ticket.
Now, go ahead, Ross. I was
Well,
just going to
another,
describe them to the listeners.
yeah. So you can find some stuff on YouTube about they're called Gallagher tumble wheels. Yeah, and probably the best thing to do is to look and see how they work. But describing how they work but they're clever. They've got a little cam in the hub in the middle of them that drops away from the two legs that are on the ground, so that they don't conduct, and then whatever two legs you're on are non-conductive, and all the rest of it's hot. The other thing I would say, as far as favorite, I've tried a lot of different reels, and I always go back to the Gallagher reels. They're the 3-in-1. They are ergonomically correct for me. They last a long time, and and then the other thing that's made, so I've done some stock grazing on some large landscapes through last winter with cattle, or, helping a young guy, family friend. And I couldn't have done it without that range work tool that I mentioned too, because they do a cattle option. So it's just a single strand run out there,
Oh, yes.
but you can pull that thing. I think there's a half mile wire on a spool on it, and in big spaces, it's great. So I think those three things are a heat step in post. Always use
Oh,
3/8 fiberglass rods with the long spring, long leg clip on them. Again, personal preference. Everybody gets used to something different, but those are
right. Well, whatever works for you, but it's always interesting to find out what works for other people.
yes. And there's reasons, I think, for everybody, and sometimes it's what you start with. Don't waste your money on lightweight wire for temporary fencing. You either go high tensile, the 12.5 gauge stuff for a permanent set, or use polystrand of some kind, because you can roll it up, you can take it down, you roll it up and take it down.
Oh, yeah.
The step in posts, and I don't care whether they're plastic or the better steel ones, if your ground isn't soft, they suck. And you can't drive them in with a hammer either.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I went with the 3/8. You can sit on their scooter or your side by side and reach out there with a dead blow hammer and push those in the ground, and just keep going and never have to get out, stomp on.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
my preference. They fit. You can take a pipe. I used to use like a 6-inch aluminum pipe and built a quiver, sit on the front of my 4-wheeler, and you just throw those in there. That's what's worked for me.
Very good. Excellent resources there, or tools to use on the farm. Our third question, what would you tell someone just getting started?
Spend good money, way more than you anticipate, if you're doing electric fence on your Charger. Don't
Yes,
go cheap on the Charger. And if you can't afford it, and you're building a whole system, get the one that you can have a remote shut off on, and so like it's old and not as, it's kind of obsolete now, but the one I used for our big grazing operation was a Stay Fix 32 joule. And that's the other thing, is high joules. There's some companies that have longer warranties. Like there's Patriot makes a good Charger. Trying to think what the other one is. There's one here made in the United States. It's actually about half the cost of most of the foreign, like Gallagher or Stay Fix or some of those. Power Wizard, I believe it is. And I had pretty good luck with them. Their warranty's good. I had some lightning strikes and stuff in Oregon, and they fixed it.
Yeah.
And they're 18 joule. at that time, it's been quite a ways back, was like $200 or something like that.
Oh,
I was
wow.
happy with it. And the other thing is
Yeah.
with your, so this is just getting started with your, make sure you have an excellent ground field. And if your fence charger, your fence wattage starts to drop, the first thing to do, if it's in the middle of summer, is go water your ground field. Put a sprinkler out there. And I even went so far, I got so frustrated with it in Oregon. We were in a very dry climate. I did a buried, encased in concrete rebar field, just like you do for a foundation on a house, and brought it out. And then it was sitting there next to where my mains charger was, and I could put a sprinkler on that thing, and my ground rod issues were away.
Oh, yes.
So any other suggestions? I think that's the big one. You're gonna, and don't give up too quick on electric fence. Have a good tester. Always have a good tester so that you know what you've got. And with the YouTube now, I mean, there's no reason not to learn how to do it right. It's inexpensive to build. It's flexible. It can be temporary. If you're leasing ground, get that piece of ground that doesn't have a fence along the creek, because, nobody, you can probably pick it up cheap because people can't run cattle on it or something, but hey,
Right.
electric fence along there. And always train your cattle or livestock, whether they're sheep or cattle, with a super hot fence, as hot as you can make it. And I can keep going. One other thing though, when you're introducing cattle to an electric fence, especially if they've never seen one, do not try to contain them initially. Introduce them, put them inside a barbed wire field. Doesn't matter whether it's 20 acres or 200 acres. But then what I did, and did it very successfully, was I would run a very hot wire just out into the middle of the field and give them plenty of room to walk around it, and hang tinfoil on that thing. And they'll come up there and smell that thing one time.
Oh,
And
yes.
don't let anybody ever tell you the cattle don't communicate. They don't all have to touch that fence.
Yeah.
They'll learn pretty fast. So those are just some tricks. That was our kind of our fun, hillbilly fun, was to watch a new bunch of cattle get trained to the hot wire fence. We'd go out there and sit and watch them touch it the first time.
I'm not sure that's something we should admit to, but there's a certain amount of satisfaction. That is, I can't even say it correctly. When you see those cows get shocked, and yeah, you're not going to bother it again.
Not going to do it again. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great advice all the way through there. I think back to my journey with electric fence, and the first part of the journey with electric fence was why is this not working when I've read that it'll work? Well, we were using cheap energizers. We didn't have it grounded good. When I made that change and decided to spend money on an energizer and put in a ground rod field like I needed to,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
changed.
And they'll last you for a very long time, so
Yeah.
yeah, they are. And the solar components now, that technology's picked things up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I started off with some cheap equipment, and it doesn't work. I still have it. I don't know why. I should throw it away.
Excellent point. I've got a couple of little cheap Gallagher solar ones that I have, mainly because that's what my dad, if he's going to go pick one up, he's going to pick that up. I have two nice solar deals, but occasionally, like, I'll need one of those. I'll go put it up, and it'll keep them in for a day or two, and then I'm mad at it, and I bring it back to the house, and just as you mentioned it, I still got them. Why? I just need to get rid of them because I'll get in a bind, and I'll go use it. In 2 days, I'll be mad at it again.
Yeah, we did the car battery one, without a solar to support it. And
Oh, yes.
yeah. And they work for a little while, but it's just a maintenance. You're always having to do it. So, but everybody's context is different as far as what they're meant,
Exactly.
where and how they need to do it. And so that's actually where, for me, I found this razor grazer unit is complete. It was designed by a guy that's grazing a lot of cattle in Canada. And
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's farmer designed or rancher designed, and it's got good battery, good solar charger, good solar panel, and it's been pretty foolproof. I don't care whether you buy one from me or it doesn't. That's not what I'm doing. It's just been a very useful tool,
Oh, yeah.
and so I'd I'd recommend them. I've recommended them to several people, and they bought it and been happy with them. And,
Oh, very good.
yeah. So
And lastly, Ross, where can others find out more about you?
I've got a LinkedIn page, but that's kind of it.
That's about it. There you go. That
So
works.
yes, we've been on Facebook. My wife keeps it a McGarva Ranch Pasture Division. We do some stuff on there.
Oh, okay. Very good. And I said lastly, but actually we have our new segment, Ask the Host. So do you have a question for me?
Why in the world did you call me?
You can blame Lynn.
Yeah.
Lynn contacted me. He says, hey, you got to get Ross on your podcast. So blame Lynn.
Yeah. I've spent.
In fact, as soon as I get off here, I'm going to text Lynn.
Yeah.
And tell him I just recorded an episode
You
with
should
Ross.
do that. He might be in bed by now.
Yeah,
No, he's been fun to work with. Lynn, they're stretching their boundaries and their context up there, and they're doing a great job with it, putting sheep on organic cotton farm for some weed control and just for some soil health stuff. And man, they found a chicken farm that was going out of business, pastured poultry deal, and they got all their parenting dogs, 4 of them.
Oh,
And
yes.
those dogs walked right into the sheep and just were at home. I was so jealous. They didn't have
Oh, well, yes.
nothing, but just
Yeah.
big old hairy, true Pyrenees dogs. So, yeah.
Oh, that is wonderful. I'm excited to see how it goes for him.
Yeah.
He's texted me a number of times about hair sheep and what he's getting into over there.
He's an avid learner. He listens all the time and asks lots of questions. So,
Yeah, he texts me podcast episodes all the time. Now, the thing is, he doesn't share my episodes with me. So I don't know if he's not finding them useful or if he thinks I already know.
I know.
I don't know.
Well, he shared yours with me, so.
Oh, well, good.
He shares them around. So, yeah.
Well, Ross, we really appreciate you coming on
Yes.
and sharing with us today.
Glad to do it. So.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we bring you stories and insights into grass-based livestock production. If you're new here, we've got something just for you. Our new listener resource guide is packed with everything you need to get started on your listening journey with the Grazing Grass Podcast. It gives you more information about the podcast, about myself, and next steps. You can grab your free copy at grazinggrass.com/guide. Don't miss out. And hey, do you have a grazing story to share? We're always looking for passionate producers to feature on the show. Whether you're just starting out or have years of experience, your story matters. Head over to grazinggrass.com/guest to learn more and apply to be a guest. We'd love to share your journey with our growing community of grazers. Until next time, keep on grazing grass.